Well, welcome everybody to San Diego United Lodge of Theosophists for the Aquarian series. All of our meetings are free and open to the public, and we welcome you online and in person as well. Tonight, the title of the talk is Relationship and Solitude, which will be given to us by Nathan Johnston. Let me read. This is by Percy Shelley on relationship and solitude. True love in this differs from gold and clay, that divide is not to take away. Love is like understanding that grows bright, gazing on many truths, 'tis like thy light. Imagination, which from earth and sky, and from the depths of human fantasy, as from 1,000 prisms and mirrors, fills the universe with glorious beams and kills error, the worm with many a sun-like arrow of its reverberated lightning. So now we introduce to you Mr. Nathan Johnston. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Let me get my sharing on here. And, oh, look, I can adjust the share. Can y'all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Beautiful.
I'm going to try and adjust it. What I would like to do would be to see all of you at this. Oh, I can. In the side for anybody who's got their camera on. Hi. Hi, everyone. So, what an evocative title we have tonight. And just lucky for us, it's also the title of an essay by Sri Raghavan Iyer. And I ended up going to this essay and learning quite a bit. So although all of us may have some thoughts that we can share about the relationship between our own moving in the world and our own inner meditation, this is also it's called a talk on the inner life. This is really, we could make it a discussion about the relationship between our inner life and our outer life. But I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's ideas about that. I'm going to just run through this amazing, a few of the key points from this amazing article. All right, so the first thing I would like to explore here from the article, these are the questions that we rarely ask together that Dr. Iyer puts together in this article. The first being about how do we relate to others, and the second being how do we sit with ourselves. So the way he describes it, this is a continual process. It's not one or the other. It's an indrawing and an outpouring that we do every day. But this idea about how we relate to others, interesting kind of criteria here, without using them, even with good intentions, as a means to our own ends. So he's introducing here, and we'll talk about it, and I really recommend everyone to check out the article because it's not as abstruse as it may seem. We're talking about Kantian morality here, and is it possible? Indeed, it's an imperative that we should pursue our own ends, but without interfering with others. So this first one is key, that we don't see others as instruments, that we see others, that we support others without interfering with them. So how do we relate to others is first, and then the second is, how do we sit with ourselves? So that solitude becomes fellowship rather than loneliness. So this is this amazing idea that if you step beyond the conditioned notions of what it means to be a member of the human family. I mean, strongly imprinted in my psyche, I would say, would be this idea of a nuclear family, maybe a family that has certain roles in place, and people get to play the roles in succession, and but maybe not every family is like that. And there are hundreds of different forms of families that we've studied. But when you think about sitting with yourself, this solitude with yourself is essential for relating with your family. So we'll move on from here. But Iyer argues that the two are not separate disciplines. Somebody who's truly self-possessed makes both possible. So we have to consider others and yet to be completely individual ourselves. Come on, move along. There we go. Oh yeah. So this is straight from the article, and I just wanted to restate the principle that all human beings should be treated as ends in themselves and not as means constitutes the core of Kantian morality, which in itself rests upon an older conception of the world as a coherent structure intelligible to the pure reason of man. This world is a moral order precisely because human beings are an integral part of it. The human mind, by an act of pure, universal, impersonal reason, is able to discern the ethical order within the natural order. Each human being is a self-determining agent within a universe which itself may be seen as a kingdom of ends. So each of us is sovereign, right? Each human being as a responsible agent can become a monarch within his or her own modest kingdom by living in terms of ends that are self-chosen. We rule ourselves by making those ends meaningful in our lives. And so then I've added the italics here. For the practical realization of this possibility, we must assume that every human being is inherently capable of acting spontaneously without interfering with other human beings. And hold it, I just have to stop share just for a minute here. I just want to look up and, just Joe's got his camera on. He's making notes. Somebody else. I just gotta look at everybody and say this is a remarkable statement. What he's done here. Let's go back. Could I see it? Yeah. Oh no, he's laying down the gauntlet here. We must assume that every human being is inherently capable of acting spontaneously without interfering with other human beings. For the practical realization of this possibility, if anybody was wondering, what about the practical realization of this possibility? Is there anything that we could do? He's saying here, right now, this is what we can do. I'm going to give you this step. He lays it down. This is the first step. So when I saw it, I was shocked. So I just want to bring our attention to that. Okay, I can go back to sharing screen now. Share and share. Okay, next. Yeah, so this is the game. Okay, this is how it can work. Actually, we can all ask ourselves this question, and there is an answer for every problem. There's a solution, and for every If everyone wills this end, is it compatible for all human beings without mutual interference? Okay, so again, this is a quote from the article. This noble mode of action. What we're talking about is an action of all together. Okay? He says, we know that this noble mode of action is not achieved because reason is clouded by irrational passion. Pure universal affirmation is distorted, dissolved, and even destroyed in the midst of the blinding partialities of confused human beings captive to conflicting impulses, aims, motives, and desires. Suppose, however, that these self-chosen ends were intrinsically compatible, and that each person, in willing an end, asked the question, if everyone wills this end, is it compatible for all human beings individually to pursue it without mutual interference? at one level, a general answer would only yield a formal criteria of action. Is there a practical way, however, in which we could readily recognize in ourselves any fall from the autonomous state of a self-determining, rational being? And then this is the real homework, the moral homework, the arithmetic at the end that we have to. You can't fudge this. You can't mess around. You can't. There's no hiding it. The numbers do not lie. Do the math again. Show me a different way. But right here it says we must identify any desire to interfere with others as springing from a part of ourselves which cannot be underwritten by the moral order and which the universe cannot protect. Oh, well, something to meditate on, but isn't that just something? We must have any desire to interfere with others. So, I mean, I guess we could just start by asking the question, what is the desire to interfere with others? Why do I think I can tell him so much what to do when certainly I've got enough of my own business that I haven't attended to? So this is, I mean, I don't have all the ideas linked up here exactly right, but the idea silent spectator comes to mind. It's not really in this article, but he does it through the process of this dynamic process of relation and solitude, which I will get to as we continue through these slides. Well, let me get through these slides, you guys. Okay, yeah, I have to move along. So, main idea is every person as an end, never only as a means. And the test is at the very bottom, could everyone will this same end without interfering with one another? So then we are all kings. Just, I got to drop this one in here. Great Bob Dylan line. He says, do your thing and you'll be king. If dogs run free. Wonderful little jazz song he does. So, yeah, to really be sovereign, you're not stepping on anyone else's toes. Now, where in your life have you pursued your own ends? We have to look within, and we have to think about where have we been treating other human beings as a means to our end. Just some ideas to think about. I am reading this right now. I don't know. Can you read this? I just wanted to make sure I wasn't talking about something that I'd been saying before. Look at where he says here about must relationships tend to become prisons or can they evolve in the direction of liberation? In the everyday context of human relationships, the critical question is whether we are becoming more tyrannical in relation to others or are allowing our closest encounters to enhance the joys of individuation. It's that old thing where we say, well, we would all get along just fine if you would just do things the way that I'm saying, or if you just think about it the way that I'm thinking about it. But this is a different way of approaching our time together, that that the value of our relationships doesn't depend upon fealty to our to any idea, that we're free to talk to each other about to examine everything. But later on in the article, this is important. Everyone should look. We're not going to have time to get into it entirely today. But there's this idea of energy exchange, and in practicing and asking these kinds of questions, we can kind of clean up our energy system so that we're not draining from others. Because that's what he discusses, is this process of vampirization that can occur. And this is how we can clean it up, is by asking these questions together. All right. Oh, yeah. So back to our beginning quote. So let us not to the marriage of true minds. Wasn't that our beginning quote? Or am I mixing up Shelley and Shakespeare? But regardless, um, I'm thinking about what is it that when we are truly ourselves, many somewhere in the writings, in the Jewel and the Lotus, and in various places, we come across the insight that we are, truly ourselves when we are alone. And how is it that, I mean, there's something about, you know, loneliness that is quite maudlin. It's like unrequited love. And I'm not putting anyone down for feeling that way. Oh, have I felt that way, throughout my life? But you have to know it's a little bit, it's hyper dramatic, right? Like the relationship that is being cultivated in our solitude. There's a kind of there's a there's a dynamic relationship between how it nourishes our ability to relate with others, and we're not expecting people to be acting as our I think what Dr. Iyer in another article somewhere he referred it to as our as puppets on our emotional landscape. They have their own motivations. Everyone here has their own goals and challenges and struggles, and the reasons for their behavior are not don't really have to do with our pleasure. So that's the tyranny, is expecting people to serve at our pleasure. But holding the full complexity of another person, that is true love. So if we think about this, I'm just going to check in with everyone. It's like a few minutes before the hour. How are we doing for time here? Monica or Jonathan or
You have lots of time.
Okay. Well, very
You're
good.
doing well.
Well, good to hear. Would anybody like to share some insights that have come up so far, or something about this idea of relationships and liberation? Sometimes we can think about solitude as being solitary confinement. That could be another kind of.
Yes. Well, Nathan, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. I'm thinking that a relationship that has evolved toward liberation rather than becoming a prison is where the people have, first and foremost, an understanding of their own complexity, the selves that exist within all of us. So if we know which self is running the show, then we can correct, if need be, and come from the higher self. And then there's that little thing called compassion. So when one person may be getting all tied up with some portion of the self that is not the higher self, or even less influenced by the higher self, if the other person has compassion, she can help the person move through the difficulty with understanding. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense, and it just makes me think. Oh, thank you very much. I should continue with my slideshow here, because really, what you're talking about, it's beginning with a structure, or having I don't know. As I listen to you talking about, using compassion as a foundational basis, like, um, I don't know. I think a lot about budgets these days. Family budgets, and
Mm.
oftentimes people are thinking about, like, oh, what are they going to do with any money that's left over, and then they never end up planning what to do with their finances, because there's never any left over.
That's
But
right.
but what you're talking about, and I didn't make a note of it, but then you touched upon it again, just speaking about coming from a compassionate place, is front loading, like making a decision before the day begins,
Mm.
and then proceeding from there. So, here, let me see if I can get back on here. So, oh yeah, so there are some ways that we keep relationship at arm's length. This is like when we are feeling challenged by our duties in the world. So, um, we may be out of balance. We may be, more towards one, more on the relationship side of the continuum, or the solitude uh, side of the continuum. But so we have some fears that may come up that prevent that balance from occurring. But uh, that's where I was tying this back to what you were saying, Monica. But we will come back to it. We're talking about front loading here. Eventually, we'll get to it. But
Okay.
so sometimes I tell you, I worry if I've included what is in my slides. But we were talking about this earlier. So it's not the silent spectator; it's the silent learner. That is the kind of position that we want that Dr. Iyer is encouraging us to move towards, instead of in our relationships with each other, um, to quietly draw out what is in the best in others, and let it teach us. This isn't something that requires a lot of action on the external plane, but this is something that is, I think, a matter of, look, he's giving us like spiritual instruction. These are like invisible instructions. He's telling us, like, here's how you direct your attention and your energy.
Yeah.
Everyone we meet, friend or stranger, is ultimately a teacher. He's helping us to adjust our posture towards learning here, by saying that it's not something that we're taking from others when we see excellence in others,
Mhm.
and it's nothing to be threatened by. And at the same time, I don't know if you guys can you, I can't see y'all, but can you relate to this idea that when somebody, I'm just raising my hand here, sometimes when somebody does something really awesome, I feel a little bit jealous, because I just feel like, how they get so smart, man, I wish I was that smart. But, um,
That's great.
you know,
Yes.
so I am aware of it. I don't think it's entirely bad, because the thing is, I am that smart. We do need to recognize the goodness and the greatness in the people around us, and recognizing excellence in another person is a way of recognizing excellence in ourselves. But that isn't what I was talking about, right? What I was really talking about is that feeling inside of yourself, which is like, like,
What about me?
yeah, what about me? A little bit of want, a little bit of lack. And
Yeah.
that is where I think it's so interesting, this instruction that is being given here in this article by Raghavan Iyer. I mean, these are concepts we've heard before. This idea of vampirization of energy, taking energy from somebody, or I don't know, pulling on someone's shirt tails or something. But this idea of silent learning is such a potent concept here, that this is tapas, is what this is. This is where there's some transformation, some transmutation is taking place, where we're recognizing possibility, and not passing judgment on it for anyone.
Yes.
Just letting it be. So, two ways to meet another person. I mean, we can really. I mean, there's not. I can't imagine. This is endless opportunities for practice with this meditation. So
Yeah.
yeah. So because that's the thing, when we master that, when we're magnetic in that, in the meditation of that we just looked at, what was it? Yeah,
Mm.
of silent learning.
Yeah.
When we develop that magnetic field, then we don't have to know the right words, because the right words will always come to us, because we're present with the people
Mm.
who are there to receive that word.
Beautiful.
So this is something else that he gets into. uh, Raghavan talks about in this article. I mean, it's reframing solitude entirely
Hmm.
as a wider fellowship. Um, what is this loneliness? It's a fear that we are separate. It's the fear of separateness, and we're taught that separateness is the dire heresy. It's nothing to be afraid of. It doesn't even exist anyways. But
Well,
this is, hmm?
it's interesting. The second one that says true solitude opens into fellowship. So, with more than the human world, mineral, plant, animal, life, and unseen orders beyond them. But it seems to be saying if you understand the solitude, um, it, there won't be a problem being with others. So once again, if we have that connection with the higher self, that opens the door to everything.
Yeah, I'm doing well today. I'm just trying to stick with this article, and I did not bring in the thousand gazillion other articles that I thought, I should talk about this too. But since you mentioned it, I just want to say there is an article called "Cognition and Freedom"
Mm.
by Raghavan Iyer, where he talks about the diamond soul in so many ways. But one of the things that he mentions in that article, he just says it plain as day, is that there are beings who, um, with consciousness such that they can put their consciousness in at any point in space or time.
Mm.
I mean, that means they could, like, here, there, everywhere. Like, they know all the things there are to know. I mean, I don't think you can put it in those terms, and that's not how Dr. Iyer put it either. But um, but that's, I mean, it's so related to what you're saying, Monica. Like, you couldn't be more together than when you're um, with everyone,
Yes.
right? In the true salt, that's the true fellowship. It's like yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about here.
Beautiful.
Okay, yeah, it's this idea of cultivating, um, you know, you could say just enjoying being with yourself, but cultivating that feeling state. Like, think about a cat, how the cats purr. You know how they are? Just
Mhm.
what makes you purr? Like, what is the, because that's like that's so companionable. The purring. It's like they're in tune with the universe. They're locked in.
That's true.
So I wanted to. This was the slide I was trying to get to. Um, that this isn't, this isn't one relationship or solitude. This is a way of life, and it
Mm.
begins. Interesting. Look, it's not like withdraw. Isn't it well, I guess it begins with withdrawing. Begin each week with quiet reflection. What have I learned? What do I owe? I mean, sometimes we read these articles from the Gupta Vidya and think like, oh, this is so abstract.
Mm.
How does this apply to me? Well, this one is very practical, and it's very easy to understand. What have I learned? What do I owe?
Mm.
I don't know. It's like a taking. It's like a taking account,
Yes.
and then so it's withdrawing is really observing. Um, like what are the objective facts? What can you see here? You know, see. Um, yeah, what's the data? And then the second piece is reflection, looking honestly at where you may have interfered with, used, or failed another. And this again, this is like the Kantian morality, right? Gosh, we don't. It's just amazing to me. I mean, you couldn't. They teach this at the universities. They do. There's all kinds of moralities, but even just this one is a good one. The idea to consider whether you are using others for your own gain or whether you are honoring that others are here for their own purpose that may be unknown to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. Remember, in Star Trek, that was the prime directive, interfering with the development of other life forms, right? You're not supposed to do it. You have to let people unfold according to the logic of their own their own understanding, their own unfolding. So
Yeah.
So look honestly at where you may have interfered with, used, or failed another, and then engage. Return to relationship, carrying that clarity into ordinary encounters. And of course, he points out in the article that this is the hard thing about life is that well, he doesn't say it in these, these are my words, but it's like there are no second chances. And many times if you've hurt somebody, it's done. And what you have is an opportunity for the rest of time to make a change in your vestures, to make a change in your will and your intention to and not to generate that kind of thought or will or feeling again.
Mm.
And yeah, and then let the small rhythm of a week mirror the larger rhythm of a life. But so that's it. Withdrawal and involvement. Nivriti and pravriti marga. Meditation paired with skillful action in the world. That's as far as I really plan to get. Oh yeah, I could ask you. We could all ask ourselves these questions. But yeah, what would you like to discuss?
How don't you go to now?
Well, listening to you, I it just occurred to me that relationship and solitude are really the same thing. If we can get to that, so there's oneself, uh, a gazillion expressions of it, but that just flashed before me as you were going through the different slides, that whether I am alone or with someone, it's the same. It really is the same thing. So I don't know if I'm talking about honesty, I don't know, but that just sort of blew up in my head, that we sort of don't have to make this major adjustment if we can relate from a higher place. And it doesn't mean that we take no interest in Um, but it just seemed to me, and I'm making too much out of it. It just seemed to me that there's oneself. So whether I am in the company of or not in the company of, it's all the same. It's still the same. And we can look out for one another with compassion when we listen to where in the self that person wants to be, and vice versa.
Ooh, I love how you brought that up about how we can look out for each other, because that's really where this article is pulling us toward, is caring for each other.
Yes.
And originally, when you were saying you came up with a word, and I don't know if you landed it, but the word that came to me from your description was sovereignty, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because whether somebody is, I mean, when someone is sovereign in themselves, whether they whether they have an audience or not, they know that they are king.
Yes. And once again, don't we have to separate the worldly sort of uh, hanger we put on ourselves or we put on others when a word like sovereignty comes up? It seems to me at least that these words like sovereignty take on a much more beautiful and softer meaning um, when we study these ideas, when we study theosophy in this way. And the poets, they all seem to get it. They all have this tone. So it isn't beating anybody over the head with our leadership. It's, wow. I'll just leave that there.
So, David, how do
I'm sorry.
people? I don't know how people unmute or.
So where does it? Could you talk a little bit about the idea of dharma, our dharma in life, in relation to what we're talking about here?
Sure. How so though, in relationship to I'm trying to think, because there's we're talking about how everyone has their own, right? And we wouldn't want to interfere with each other's. Is that what you mean?
Well, it's sort of what drives our core being. I would think has to do with our dharma and what we're going to do in this life. Sovereignty is one thing, having a freedom, but there are other forces working in us due to our experience, our karma, uh, our 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 duties in life.
This is big.
Right, it's big, right?
I'm not sure if I'm going to get at the right angle at it right now, but
Any angle is good to explore.
but so I mean, the thing that occurs to me is just how our time alone teaches us how to be in company. When I mean, I think about, and then our time together is fruit for many many hours of meditation afterwards. If you've ever been to a Thanksgiving dinner with your family, so but Dharma really, wrapped up with like, so that's our duty, and it's not necessarily something that we always feel that all people are equally clear about. If they know what they should be doing. So this idea introduced in this article, I think, is unique because it's like communal. I mean, each of us can practice it separately to say, like, how can I, is there something fundamental to my spa dharma, if you will, my unique, path and purpose on this earth, is there something that I can practice and reproduce without interfering with anybody else? So that I can do on my own. But the communal component that I think is interesting about this, David, is that you could do this in an intentional community, in a commune, with a family, with an organization. You could gather people together and say, here's a practice for you. Just think about this. What is it? A quality, that we all admire in you, that we've talked about many times. How industrious you are, how creative you are, how you solve problems. Whatever it is. And then, anyways, I'm sorry. I'm
Beautiful.
This is really
Joe?
exciting. But the next thing you do is like, how can we all do this together? So it can be a group. I'm thinking team building exercise here.
Just one last thought on that is I was just thinking as you were speaking is that, we talk about this idea of loneliness and solitude, but in reality, in terms of being active, conscious beings, we're never alone. We're always affecting others. So
It's beautiful.
we can't really, I think it's a luxury to think, that we can separate ourselves and get off the hook, so to speak.
Yes, thank you. And nice segue to Joe, who has pointed out something similar once upon a time. I remember he mentioned about how just gravitationally we're all related to each other on the planet. We make a move and we're all affected. So I remember he said that one time. But Joe?
Thank you. Yeah, when I lift my barbells in the morning, I feel the weight of the whole earth in them. The Eiffel Tower is pulling on them as much as the Himalayas. I thank you, Nathan, for your exploration of this. I found it helpful just to remind myself, although my philosophy major is many years ago now, but remind myself a little bit about Kantian ethics in regard to this article. That first paragraph is, he's kind of writing in the scholarly way where you make a reference, and then that first paragraph, he's not explaining the theosophical view, he's elaborating the Kantian view of morality. That's what that first paragraph is. And so Kantian morality was in philosophy is called a deontological ethics. That is, it's duty-based. And it's contrasted with utilitarian ethics, which is outcome-based. So there's a debate in human life about, does the ends justify the means or not? And so in the Kantian system, you take your place within the moral order, and this business about interfering with others is very important, because the Kantian view is that true freedom, true liberty of the will, has to do with the affirmation, going back to David's point, has to do with the affirmation of duty as you freely recognize it, and not as it is given to you by any other. So in the Kantian system, the laws of Manu or the 10 Commandments or any system of ethics that's handed down to you would still be coercion and interference by others. So you have to make a free affirmation, a free recognition through reason of your place in the moral order. So that's why his groundwork for Metaphysic of Morals, that wonderful small text where he lays out his ethics and lays out the categorical imperative. It's kind of he's saying he's taking the reader on a path of common sense morality. He says, we all know this stuff, I'm just making it obvious. So there is this notion of that as he says, you recognize that the true the only absolute value that a human being can find in life, the true good, the highest good, is in other human beings. So you find the inestimable worth, the absolute worth of another human being, and from that perception then comes this desire never to use them as a means to another end, to honor the unfolding of freedom within them, which is their own recognition of duty, to enhance that by not interfering with them, by not coercing them in any way. So, so you never use another person as an object. He said, this is what we mean by a person, not an object, is this inherent dignity. So he starts from that. It's a kind of a spiritual perception. And I guess, some of the criticism, and he's kind of hinting at some of the criticism over the years of Kantian morality, where, okay, you have this, treat everyone as an end, as a final end. Um, and this is very important. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but that in my perception of duty, I recognize that I'm the lawmaker.
Mm.
I'm not. The laws are not given to me by anyone else. That is the embodiment of universal reason within me voluntarily recognizes its own creation. So there's no outside God in that sense.
Right.
And I've not. That's why duty, the constraints of duty and freedom, bond together. And for him, then it's liberty is not the free assertion of my selfishness. That's bondage, because that means I'm bonded to this. I'm caught in a psychic realm. He's giving a kind of a noetic ethics. But going back to my other point, the criticism, and this is hinted at by Raghavan here, the criticism was in this purely formal and rationalistic explanation of morality, however beautiful and intuitive it is. How do we get traction? Is it so abstract that it doesn't become practical? How do we do that?
Mm.
I think he's exploring that a little bit. Anyway, that's just a few things there that I think are helpful to keep in mind here.
Very important.
Yeah, that is what he does. Exactly. Thank you so much, Joe. I love hearing you talk about it. So who's up next? Should we have
Chris?
Chris? Yeah.
Chris?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks again for the talk today, and really timely, to be honest. I was having this conversation last night with a friend of mine, and when we think about not just our own relationship with self, but our relationship with others, we all know people who jump from like one relationship to another, and that solitude really helps, I think, with transformation, right? Giving you that time to understand yourself and really evolve and get to that next level. And if you don't take that time, then you won't really be able to grow in the same way that others do. And so I think it's a really important aspect to bring up. And I just wanted to share how interesting it was that we were having this conversation last night.
Beautiful. Do you mind if I say something about that in Raghavan Iyer's article? He says human beings willing to take their lives into their own hands can acknowledge when they have used a person as a means to their own end and see this unworthy. Highly evolved souls who fall into such abuses will go into a period of penance. They will engage in a chosen discipline of thought and action so as to atone for their past misuse. Penance is not to be understood in terms of externals. True tapas touches the core of one's inward integrity. It fosters a calm reliance upon the great law of universal unity and ethical causation. It is rooted in the wisdom that protects right relationships. So you just put my mind on this section. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Joe, did you have something else you wanted to add? Okay, Judy.
Oh, yes. I appreciate what everyone has been saying and bringing into this fellowship. There is an amazing essay by Emerson called Worship, in which he talks about when he was still a Unitarian, his favorite part of the service was when they all sat together meditating, because he said we were all together as one, and yet we were apart, and yet together. And there's a sense in which I think that is true of any group. What we bring to it from our solitude is very important. I mean, Whitehead said that religion was what we did when we were alone. Well, that's true. I mean, there's a sense in which we have to have a solitude time every day, or we would go crazy if we couldn't at least go to sleep. But we also need to bring to the fact that somebody first walks into a meeting, any kind of a meeting, or maybe a theosophy one, maybe the first thing they think about is, well, what's in this for me? What can these people do for me? But after a while, with growth, they begin to think, well, what can I do for them, for this group, or for others in the group? So growth is involved, I think, both in solitude and uh, spiritual companionship. And I think they're both very important. And, as the speaker pointed out, they really do go together. So thank you all for your comments.
Ken, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. I appreciate your review of this article and the discussion that we've been engendered here. I wanted to bring up something that I've been thinking about for a couple of years. In 2023, here in the United States, the U.S. Surgeon General put out an article, and I was in the public health service myself like 30 years ago. So this is an interesting thing because it's related to day-to-day physical medicine and physical body health of people, and it has to do. The title is the epidemic.
Ken, is there any way you could move closer to the mic? Somebody said they can't hear you well.
Oh, there is a microphone right next to me. Maybe it's not turned on.
I don't know.
It's about 6 inches from my mouth, but maybe the mic is not turned on.
No, I can hear you better now, I think, just by moving just a little closer.
How about this? Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see Joe Miller put the hands up. So talking about the idea of an important article by the U.S. Surgeon General called Isolation and Loneliness, the Epidemic of Isolation and Loneliness, and pointing out how there are physical body negative effects, cardiovascular effects, dementia effects, emphysema, diabetes effects of isolation and loneliness, and even increased mortality, so early death. And I think what is underlying that article, especially, the Surgeon General's article, in the comparison to today's article, as we are in our theosophical world moving towards a more sophisticated and more advanced sense of who we are, identity-wise, sort of like the Delphic Oracle, know thyself. So in theosophy, we're holding on to a much, you might say, a more elevated sense of identity, as Monica was saying earlier this afternoon, that really there's one self and we're all part of that myriad facets of the one self. Whereas the Surgeon General and American medicine is looking at a human population in this country where people are really trapped in this delusion of separateness and suffering with this identity that I think the beginning of Kant's philosophy in one of your early slides is saying all human beings treated as ends in themselves as not as means. So I think what most of Americans are doing are treating each other as a means to an end. A relationship, even a marital family, husband-wife relationship, to alleviate their sense of isolation and loneliness, or maybe to use them in some way, shape, or form. So really a transactional kind of relationship. And so then, given that that's part of the suffering that we're looking at in the world at large, how can then we, as a group of theosophists, lead by example, maybe, or how to alleviate some of this suffering of others that Blavatsky talks about as this delusion of separation that the Surgeon General has pointed out in this article. And actually, I saw him speak in a meeting in May a couple months ago in person. Former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy is the guy's name. Yeah, so that's the question. What can we do in our day-to-day life? Because you did point to some homework.
Wow, that's huge. But I'm amazingly thinking that it's related to something that Joe already said, because and something that we've been talking about. That's such a great question, Ken. But you're saying, like, how can we make this? I'm sorry, it slipped away from me. I had the answer.
There's so much. There's so much in this article that I was given. I just want to.
Monica, you need your mic.
Oh, okay. Thank you. No. All right. So, anyway, I wanted to read this part because it's simply, what do we do to make it better? It says we could authentically enter into the family of man and become members, of that brotherhood of human beings who do their utmost in the depths of solitude and self-examination, as well as in the gamut of their relationships in daily life, to reenact in simple situations what at an exalted level is effortlessly exemplified by the brotherhood of bodhisattvas. So spoke to me as a real connection. Here, okay, a real connection between everyday life and the exalted state of these beings. And it simply is saying that if we understand it and digest it well enough, we can put it in the simplest of terms, in the simplest of relationships. And that to me gives us a head start. We don't have to think in terms of, we have to be speaking in some kind of way that people in general don't hear. What people hear is our state of consciousness. So.
Well, thank you, Monica. That helps, because I think one thing, in my opinion, that has happened is that a lot of people have been.
Oh, Ken, I can't hear you.
Oh, let me move to the mic.
Is that mic?
It must be not turned on.
Okay.
How about this testing? Hello.
Could be better.
Okay, how's this? Yeah, there's one active mic in the room here. I'm in the room with Monica. So the thought is about humans being hypnotized for a long time to be the victims and looking for a big brother, like 1984. And would you say, Nathan, that an example of vampirization that you pointed out is this idea that the Judeo-Christian New Testament idea that touching the hem of Jesus is a way to gain some benefit or salvation or healing of your own, as opposed to being an autonomous, independent person that can work on his own or her own, healing or benefit. So touching the hem of Jesus, or searching for a guru, or looking for an influencer or a leader, is a kind of a mindset that I think many people in our country have adopted. And so the question I was asking earlier is, how do we gently shift that mindset idea that has been really powerfully trained or hypnotized or propagandized or educated into the general population, that we need to touch the hem of Jesus, or to have a guru to guide us, or a big brother like George Orwell to lead us?
Or it might be just the other way, just the opposite, actually. I mean, we think that we can touch the hem of Jesus, and it may be true from like in that kind of vampirization kind of way. Like if I don't know about this stuff, but it when I say that it could be the opposite way around, what I'm saying is that um, the Mahatmas do the best they can. Jesus does the best they can. They actually can't give to us unless we show up the right way. It's not just touching the hem that we're going for here. We need to be full, upright, servants of the masters in order to get the master, curriculum to practice our ABCs with. But so that's it. That is what Joe was. I think Joe touched on it, and it was related to your question, Ken. It was about how it's in this idea that if all of our obligations are self-chosen, the masters can't choose for us. We have to choose, and also just I was thinking about it. It's like, I don't know. Just say there's so many good things in the world, you guys. The world is made out of good things. Now, not the same good thing is good for everyone. People have different tastes, preferences, so on and so forth. That's why we have different brands. I don't know why we have different brands. Sometimes I feel like, you know what? One brand for everybody. We got one thing, that's all you need. But no, it's because of human creativity that there are all of these different ways of going about it. And now there are some products that are better than others. There are some products that do amazing things. But guess what? Nobody's going to get that product because you tell them to get it. They're going to get it when they say, by golly, sign me up for that. I need the benefits that offer, that product, provides. That's when they're going to do it. You can't, I don't know. It's almost like this is the secret about being a teacher, a theosophist, a musician, somebody who gets others to play along, is you can't actually tell them what to do. You have to play with them and inspire them to try a thing. So, okay.
Yes, let me just, oh boy, here we go. Let me add one little thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with touching the hem of Jesus Christ or Buddha or any other great being. But what keeps getting left out of the exchange is that this that we're touching is inside of us as well. And this is just a reminder. But I don't know if it's, all Christianity or whatever structured thing through which all the brothers of light come through. They seem to continuously leave out the very important part that this exists within us. And I'm here to show you this. I'm here to help you get a bit of this so that you can work toward where they've all become. So it's a sadness that I think many of us that know better have, but it's like, okay, this is going to be the time when everybody knows that this is inside of us. And this touch that we're given, this heads up that we're given is for the purpose of aligning ourselves with what is within. So I just wanted to say that. All right. Judy? Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry, Judy. Joe.
Thank you, Monica. In a way, you anticipated I wanted to make a very simple comment, but before that, just a brief comment on the metaphor of vampirization. Of course, a vampire steals somebody's life essence, don't they? They feed their own by taking away from others. And so I think it's, it's interesting to think about that metaphor in respect of what he's referring to. We live at a time right now where there is sort of the dark arts, the gray magic of appealing to the weaknesses of others, especially using AI, using mass media to stimulate and appeal to the weaknesses of others in order to manipulate them, to interfere with their lives, to coerce them. And in the process, we make them lesser human beings. We throw off their sense of guidance. We throw off their sense of their own directions. It's a very powerful metaphor to think about with respect to modern mass culture. But the simple comment I wanted to make was in some sense, as I finish with this article, I come away with a very simple practical question: how do I feel closer to others? Because it is in my sense of isolation, which we're told is myopic and illusory, my sense of isolation, that the trouble occurs. There's this powerful statement in the Light on the Path where he says, and I'm just paraphrasing it, something like, at some point, can I be in the posture where I can say, when the master looks into my heart, does he find it utterly clean? And that's a kind of a powerful talisman I've found over the years. For example, if I'm having a difficulty in a relationship with another person, there's some scuff or misunderstanding or estrangement going on with a family member or whatnot, to ask that question with respect to that person. The very person that I'm feeling animosity or defensive about, to say, if this person looks into my heart, can they find it utterly clean towards them? Can I generate a feeling of pure benevolence and closeness to them? Can I overcome this sense of separation that's going to occur? And that's of course, it's an imaginative exercise, but I think it's very practical, and it can change something in us. It can allow us to do the work on that relationship before we're suddenly physically put in front of this person and all the awkwardness occurs. I think that the tendency is to say, "Oh, I don't want to deal with that." And then we're put in the situation, well, the famous Thanksgiving dinner that Nathan's brought up already. But we're put in a situation where then there's all that awkwardness. Well, we haven't done the work because we've consented to this idea, oh yeah, I'm separate from them until Thanksgiving. Who says? You're not. So I think there is this notion of being tuned into, and Raghavan talks about that elsewhere, about really thinking through all one's relationships and one's, and also, even in death doesn't mean we're not separate to the people we have known who have passed away. So anyway, just coming away, my question after I read this article is, how do I feel closer to others? What do I do to feel closer to others?
Beautiful. Thank you, Joe. Judy?
Yes,
Judy?
well,
Yes, you'll be our last.
what Joe said is very important, and thinking about this business of touching the hem of Jesus or the Buddha or some great adept, what one must remember is that in the case of Jesus, every one of his disciples was murdered. I had a student say to me once, "We don't need to study this stuff. After all, Jesus Christ did it all. He died for us, and we just need to make a lot of money and go to heaven." I said, "No." He said to go proclaim the gospel. And when they did, they were all killed. And the early Christians, who were mostly Gnostics, according to a great deal of research, very much more like Theosophists, some of them were massively murdered in the Colosseum in terribly brutal ways, but they stood together. They met in catacombs, and pretty soon their movement became dominant. Of course, it isn't the kind of movement perhaps the adept Jesus would have imagined would happen. He was very ill served, but still, question is, what can you really do for the great being rather than what he can do for you, what he has already done for you.
Mm.
And so that is the question I think we need to ask, and how to be closer to others and help others more. As Joe said, is primarily important.
Can I make a comment? I
Sure.
guess this microphone thing.
I know.
Thank you, Judy, so much for that.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm thinking of in this conversation about something that I think connects touching the hem of a great being with something we can actually do in a practical way. And I got this idea really from George William Russell. And he talks about how in some of his writings where he goes over the idea of a great Buddha, right? Who thinks through the whole world. So it's kind of a way of mathematical way of really fellowship with all of humanity. So it's the famous thing. I think it's in the Light of Asia and other places where he with his goes through his heart and he thinks about his fellowship and his brotherhood and his love with each quarter of humanity one at a time. So how he divides that, I don't know. But anyway, it's a quarter and eventually it gets to be the whole. So that's the main thing. I'm also thinking of a meditation that, who's the guy that wrote, can't think of his name, but he is the French biologist who became a Buddhist for 35 years.
Matthew Ricard.
Thank you, Joe. Matthew Ricard, where he talks about non-referential compassion. And it's kind of like HPB's Love Without an Object, where he says, imagine a mother with her unconditional love for her child. And then start, as the way Ken was saying this, where you expand the identity, but then work your way out. You keep the unconditional love going, but then you expand out until be all humanity. So then going back to George William Russell, he says, sometimes when we're alone, there's these different moods that we experience. And sometimes we actually feel ourselves getting pulled down. And so why is that, And he's taking the idea that since we're not separate, then we are connected to other beings. Is our downness coming to us from another being? In one way, we could say, they're pulling me down. What a drag. Another way would be, maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe to help. Thank you, Monica. I don't have to get pulled down here. Maybe I do have sovereignty here. Maybe there's something I can do the work, as Joe was saying. I can think this through and literally elevate the atmosphere, like Thoreau might say, in such a way that, given the fact that we really are connected with other people, that it might actually help that other person. We don't have to know who it was. So, that's just a thought.
Well, Nathan, we'd like to thank you for such a beautiful presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Gave us
Nathan.
a lot to think about. I just would like to say August 22nd, Sheila and Shanti will be the focus. And we hope that you will come back and be with us. And until then, namaste.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Nathan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Namaste. Take care, everyone.
Yes. Be well, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I must say.